one talks about this.
No one talks about this. And
like,
I think that like
boundaries are always seen to be as just like a pure good thing that no one can really come up against or challenge.
Yeah.
In the past few years, it seems like as a society, we've been really focused in a good way on setting boundaries.
Yeah, boundaries has almost become like a buzzword.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a bad thing. Like in a lot of ways, like millennials, Gen Z have become, I guess, the most self-aware generations.
Yeah.
Like more people are pushing friends towards counseling, more people are taking counseling themselves.
Recognizing toxic behaviors in like maybe friendships or family relationships that they have.
Yeah, and I think with every like pendulum swing, because like our parents and our parents' parents would have been so non-equipped and educated when it comes to boundaries, when it comes to like even the language that is often found in clinical like counseling and psychology, that I think that when the pendulum swings the other way, just like how we have to be mindful of the pitfalls on the other side, we have to be pitfalls on the overswing to like the hyper awareness as well. And something that we've been talking about a little bit is like this concept of boundaries. And it seems like there's like three key ways, or three key things I should say, that people don't tell or don't talk about when it comes to boundaries. And so we want to kind of uncover those three things. Let's start. Let's start uncovering these three things. Okay. The first thing is that there is such thing as bad boundaries.
And no one talks about this.
No one talks about this. And
like,
I think that like
boundaries are always seen to be as just like a pure good thing that no one can really come up against or challenge.
Yeah, there are such things as bad boundaries. And I think that we have to remember that the essence of boundaries first stemmed from this desire to protect oneself or protect others from abuse, not discomfort.
Yeah.
And I think that it's kind of expanded to go like, oh, I don't like taking meetings before 10 a.m. So one of my boundaries that I'm setting is I'm not taking any meetings before 10 a.m. because I'm not fully awake yet.
Yeah.
And it's just like, no, but sometimes being a working adult means you have to
do things you don't want to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And like sometimes there'll be people in life that you don't want to deal with or you're uncomfortable around. Not uncomfortable in an unsafe way, but I'm just saying like little things. And you can't just always simply set a boundary with that person so you just don't have to deal with them.
Yeah.
You have to learn how to integrate your life so that you can work around them and their bad attitude or maybe address it with them.
Yeah. And I think there's ways to, for example, if it's like someone in your life that you feel like, oh, it's hard for me to be around them, not because of an abusive thing or not because they mistreat you all the time. It's just hard for you to be around them. It's like there's a version of a boundary where it's like, oh, I'll hang out with this person on a weekend because I know that I'm less stressed on the weekend and it'll be easier for me to hang out with them. And I think when it comes to family, again, barring like abuse or people crossing serious lines with you that makes you feel like, oh no, I have to completely cut this person off. I think it's important to go like, instead of going like, oh, I'm never gonna be in a room with this person and that's my boundary, being like, no, like I can be in a room with them, but with these kind of measures in place.
Yeah.
Can you give an example of something like that? Like, I can't be in a room with this person or...
I think like there's some people in my life that have been like, you know what, I don't think it's appropriate to cut them out of my life completely, but I'm not going to hang out with them one-on-one anymore.
Yeah.
And so I will hang out with them in groups, and I'm totally happy to do that. But in terms of one-on-one, I just don't find it healthy to spend that time with them. And so it's kind of like a boundary in a way. But
yeah, and I think that a part of what's given fuel to like this boundary culture is cancel culture, where it's like the moment someone doesn't fully align with me or the moment someone offends me, I cancel them. They have no room in my life. But we have to remember that having people in our life that do challenge us, that do increase our patience and our self-control is a positive thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's important for people to know, again, there are such things as bad boundaries.
Yeah.
Boundaries are meant to protect you from abuse, not to protect you from discomfort.
Yeah.
What's the next thing?
Okay,
What's
the second thing is boundaries shouldn't be your personality.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why a lot of people have made it their personality in recent years is just because it's become such popular, like, vernacular amongst our culture, amongst our society.
What's an example of someone making boundaries their personality? Like, what's the vibe? What do you, just in case people don't know?
I think when there's just like a lack of flexibility with someone and the way they live their life.
Yeah.
I think an example would be like if someone were to be like, right now in my life, I'm in a season of saying no. And so the reason that would be like made their personality is because now when people approach them, invite them to things, like their answer is always going to be no. And now people maybe don't approach you the same because they know your answer is just going to be no. And I think there's a time and a place for that. Like maybe you're burnt out, or maybe you just said yes to way too much in your past and you have like a past of that. And there needs to be a time where you're not saying yes to everything.
Yeah.
But if you're like indefinitely saying no to everything, then that's going to become your personality, because that's going to limit your life a lot.
Yeah.
It's going to limit your friendships, your experiences, your ability to give back to the world. And so, yeah, I would say that's an example where that can slowly start to become someone's personality.
Yeah. And I think, again, drawing on the first point, it's so important to like allow yourself to lean into challenge.
Yeah.
Allow yourself to lean into people who maybe require more of you than you're used to giving.
Yeah.
Because I think that it's gotten to a point where it's like, oh, as soon as I feel a measure of like, oh, this is making me uncomfortable, I have to set this boundary. And that evolves someone into this place where they're setting boundaries for every single thing in their life. And there's like limits you can set, or there's like lines you can draw without feeling like, oh, in every area of my life, I'm like waving this flag of boundaries because I'm a boundaried person. It's like, yeah, I think there's a way to do it that is measured and mature.
Yeah.
The last one, the third one, is a good one. And it's this concept of boundaries shouldn't be made on an island. So like you shouldn't just go away in a room, draw up boundaries and say like, hey world, this is my boundary. Sometimes people don't even communicate that this is their boundary, but you just stop hearing from a family member and you're like, whoa, where'd that come from? And I love this because there was a point recently where I was like thinking through a potential boundary I wanted to set with someone in my life, and I remember like my sister actually challenged me on a boundary. And I really liked that because I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Like maybe this was a bit extreme, or maybe this is a bit.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important for people to kind of submit it to a trusted person.
Yeah.
Whether it be a counselor or a friend or a significant other who can be objective and be like, hey, like Daniel, or hey, Mariah, like, do you think that's really fair? Do you think that's a bit extreme? Or I think you have a higher threshold for challenge than this boundary would suggest.
And because boundaries have almost become this like untouchable thing.
Yeah,
like
it's like the trump card.
Yeah, it's like, well, that's my boundary. And then people are kind of like, okay, well, what am I supposed to say to that? And so, yeah, inviting feedback for your boundaries, maybe not to the person you're going to set the boundary with, definitely not to that person, but to your friends, your family, people who know the situation you're going through, your counselor, is really healthy. And can really help you from maybe even causing unnecessary hurt.
Yeah.
You know, boundaries like can be hurtful to the person that they're being set to, and if they don't need to be set, then even better.
And I think too, it's like make sure it's like 2 or 3 people who are like being able to speak into it a little bit, because like I love counseling. My undergrad's in counseling. I have a counselor, had the same counselor for the last 10 years, and she's awesome. I think though, like counselors are working with you to protect you and to make sure you're set up with the emotional, psychological resources to be able to like thrive in life. So there'll be times where a counselor will just hear your side of the story And so they'll respond to the side that they're hearing, and will give you a bunch of boundaries.
They don't see the full picture.
They don't see the full picture.
They
so
don't
you have
have
to,
the full context.
Yeah.
And
So
you're
it's like,
probably not giving them the full
yeah,
context.
and the counselor's objective, but sometimes because they're getting a subjective perspective, they can't help but have their, like, I guess their leaning when it comes to how you should approach a situation and boundaries be towards you as opposed to towards, you know what I mean?
Good. That's
so it's
good.
so important to have multiple people in your life who have different angles be able to help you inform your boundaries.
So good. So those are 3 things to keep in mind about boundaries and setting boundaries and not setting boundaries. If you have any thoughts, or if you found any of these points challenging, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. So make sure to comment below.
And if you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe and share if there's someone out there who you think would be benefited by this information.
And we'll talk to you next week.